Hello students, I am Dr. L.K. Das, Assistant Professor of Sociology at the Department of HSS IIT Roorkee. Welcome to another lecture of the NPTEL course Power and Politics in Contemporary India, a Sociological View. In the last class, we had discussed Benedict Anderson's work and in which he had claimed that a nation is an imagined political community. Now, in that we had also discussed that can a nation be just an imagined political community, and we saw all the examples that he is providing, all the classifications he has given, so on and so forth. But when his ideas got translated and brought to other kind of cultures, a problem appeared. The problem was that when we say that a nation is an imagined political community, the first question that comes, or a very commonsensical question that comes, is whose? Whose ideas are we talking about when you say that it is an imagination, or whose imagination is it? Is it imagination of everybody, or is it imagination of a specific group of people? If you remember, I had spoken about the difference between language and that of dialects, the difference between Hindi and the difference between Braj. So, when we are talking about what Benedict Anderson has argued in terms of nation as an imagined political community, Partho Chatterjee, whom we have encountered again and again in different fields, asks this very fundamental question, in which he says that yes, I agree with Benedict Anderson that nation is an imagined political community, but whose imagination is this? Is this imagination that of the colonial rulers? Is this the imagination of the elites within the Indian context? Is it the imagination of the vernacular subaltern masses, or is this the imagination of the Dalits and Adivasis, or is this the imagination of women? And also, what kind of women? Are these women educated? Are these women from urban locations, or are these women from rural areas? So, whose idea are we talking about? And in this lecture, that's exactly what we are going to see. So, this entire lecture is based on Partho Chatterjee's book Nation and its Fragments, and this lecture is divided into two specific sections. In the first section, we will address the question that Partho Chatterjee is posing to the Benedict Anderson in terms of whose imagined community, and in the second section we will discuss the fragments. So, what are the different fragments within the Indian nation, and how can we understand these fragments as part of a united whole? So, while asking this question, whose imagined community, Partho Chatterjee argues that Benedict Anderson's imagined community is nothing but an Eurocentric model. Why? Because Anderson claims that the post-colonial nations or the colonized countries, what they have done is that they have borrowed the idea of nation and nationalism from the West or from the Europeans. Now, if they have done so, that means, and this is a very fundamental question that Partho Chatterjee is asking here, if we have borrowed everything from the Europeans, then where does our sovereignty lies? Then they know everything, we don't know anything at all. That means it is nothing, nationalism in the context of post-colonial nations is nothing else but a derivative copies of Europe's experiences, or derivative discourse. Now, this is a very powerful and polemical way of arguing against Anderson, because as I discussed in the previous class, Anderson's argument of nation being an imagined community completely revolutionized and brought a rupture in the way we understood society, we understood state-society relationships in terms of nation and nationalism. So when Partha Chatterjee, somebody sitting in Calcutta, is questioning Anderson's argument, it's like a counter revolution or a counter movement to regain something and tell the West that you are not the ones who are going to dictate to us what we feel about nation, what we feel about our nationality, and what we feel about national imagination. Because we in India, like most of the ex-colonial nations or ex-colonized nations, fought against these colonizing forces. And because we fought against these colonizing forces, even at the level of culture, if we take the cultural argument of Anderson at its face value, how can the culture of Benedict Anderson and the culture of Partha Chatterjee be one and the same? It is nigh impossible. If it is impossible, then where do we move from here? Now there is a deadlock. And how do you open this deadlock? So Partha Chatterjee is not throwing the Anderson's baby with bathwater. Rather, what he is doing is he's reclassifying this entire idea of imagined community of Benedict Anderson's framework and claim that we have to understand post-colonial nationalism within the domain of sovereignty in terms of outside colonial control, as well as in terms of the most creative aspects of what is inside or inside outside. This inside outside binary is what is fundamentally concerning about a post colonial nation. The inner and outer domains are material and spiritual. So the Indians or Indian nationalists, even during the anti-colonial movement, nationalist movement, argued that okay, we completely accept that in terms of economy, in terms of statecraft, in terms of science, in terms of technology, the Western nations are far more superior to us. But when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to culture, family, religion, language, you cannot dictate terms to, or the colonial powers cannot dictate terms to the Indian nation. Why? Because the languages that we speak, they could be thousands of years old. The religion that we practice, they happen to be some of the oldest religions, and family and culture that we have in this Indian subcontinent has grown autonomously, whether it is caste, whether it is the tribal affinity towards their religions or our beliefs. This is the inner self, and no material domain can ever infringe upon it and dictate terms to us. So, our authentic national identity is created through the spiritual inner life, and this inner life gets conceptualized within home as moral sites of national difference. Outside of it, you are the best, you are the greatest, but inside, no, you cannot enter inside our domain, inside our spiritual domain, into our inner domain of culture, family, religion and language. So cultural production, the way it happened, everything happened in the inner domain, as I just said, in terms of language, literature, art and family life. So Partha Chatterjee is giving the example of Bengal School of Art, and how Bengal School of Art is authentically or autonomously modern, which has or which is distinct from European aesthetics. So even when the print capitalism was used in the Indian context, it was first nationalized so that a particular moral vernacular culture can be spread, rather than the spread of whatever ideas were coming from the West. And from West I meant the West of or the nation of Britain, because they were the dominant force. So even our women or our new women are traditional and virtuous, but this virtue and this traditionalism is different from the traditionalism or virtuousness of the Western woman. So this inner and outer domain is something that created national imagination and cultural production of it. So we became modern not in terms of our industries, not in terms of our railways, not in terms of our outer materialist beings. Rather, we are also getting into a project of cultural modernity. So what we did in the 19th century was focus on culture. So if you look at India as a sphere, then the first thing the national imagination did was it creates specific fragments of this imagination that was initially constructed by the British. And the first was creation of these fragments, and slowly to remove these fragments and brought it out, slowly to create these fragments and bring it out. This way, over a period of decades, the imaginary or even the location of British institutions became smaller and smaller, and the nationalists started occupying more and more space within this imagination. And when Mahatma Gandhi came to India, he found a very fertile ground on which now the political movement can be carried forward. But all the previous works were done by the other kind of nationalists, whom we can say that probably they were writing petitions, probably they were fighting legal cases, but what they were also doing was that they are creating conditions for a political mobilization. And what did the colonial state did here? The colonial state, while speaking about modernity, while speaking about its own greatness, always created a colonial difference, which according to the Partha Chatterjee is nothing but a permanent division between the ruler and the ruled. We are the white British, we are from a superior race, we are from a superior culture, we are from a superior civilization. That is the reason why we are the rulers and you are the ruled. So this colonial difference, unless and until it is taken care of, it is considered, we can never ever argue or accept Benedict Anderson's argument about nation as an imagined political community, because our idea of the nation is substantially different from how the West thought about it, because the West were never colonized. Always remember this point. So while there was something happening at the internal level, we have to take care of an outsider aggressor and all the differences that we have inside of it. So even when the British, within this framework, even when the British or the colonial rulers, they introduced certain modern institutions like bureaucracy, legal systems and scientific institutions, they were never democratized. All the major positions, all the language, all the literature, all the scientific inventions, everything was created in the image of the colonial powers rather than what was happening there and what could have been created. So while there was rationality, there was also racial hierarchy. So we had modernization without equality, but modernization spoke about equality, right? That is the reason why we have liberty, the equality and fraternity. So if that is not there, then what is the meaning of modernization? So whatever we received here, we received a filtered aspect of it, and hierarchy was, or unequal relationships were always maintained. So while colonial modernity universalized Western power, it denied universality to the others. Now let us look at the different fragments of the nation. The first fragment that the Partha Chatterjee brings in front of us are the nationalist elites. Now he calls these nationalist elites, which includes people like Bankim Chandra, people like Nehru, people like Gandhi, as ambivalent figures. Why so? Because many of them were educated in Western thought. Both Gandhi and Nehru studied in UK or in England. So most of the imagination and as well as understanding they had, it came from their experiences, their studies and education from that context. So now that they have come back to India, what do they do? Here they are in England, now they have come back to India. Here you have liberty, here you have equality, here you have fraternity, and here you are just a subject or a colonial subject. Now as a colonial subject, you have very little rights, you are not even a citizen. In that sense, are they going to be Indians, or are they going to be English or Europeans, or are they going to be something else? Are they going to have brown masks and white faces? They are brown in their looks, but everything else is white. Or they are going to be mediators between the two. And if they are going to be mediators, then in what language they are going to mediate between the two? So here you have the white British, here you have the natives, and in between you have Gandhi, Nehru, Ambedkar and everyone else. So that is the reason why he calls them ambivalent figures, because these figures with their own rationality wanted to translate Western modernity into an indigenous idiom. That is the reason why they created middle class public sphere and nationalist press while mediating between state and the subalterns, as I just discussed here. But because they are moving on two boats, so on the one hand they had traditionalism because they were Indians and they wanted to associate themselves with India. On the other hand, they were also followers of liberal constitutionalism, and with liberal constitutionalism they wanted to see what are the benefits they can get from the colonial state for themselves as well as for the natives. So This again created what he calls as a nationalist elite because of this duality of purpose and duality of belonging. So he calls it the difference between elite and the everyday people. The nation also within this context was imagined in a specific way, or the colonial nation or colonized nation was imagined in a particular way, in which the history was rewritten and ancient civilizations in terms of Vedas, epics, Upanishads, so on and so forth, were given or kept as proof of an unbroken moral essence, which essentially means, as Dayanand Saraswati would argue, that let us go back to the Vedas, because our ancient civilization is giving us an idea as to how do we move to the front in future. And this kind of a classification created an unbreakable arrow of time in which you have the ancient civilization or ancient Hindu civilization, and we are going to revive our Hindu-ness. Everything that came in between, they were all outsiders. So this kind of classification, or what is says at a classicization, erases all forms of heterogeneity and conflict from the past. So this way a certain idea of moral decline and regeneration was created for a glorious past. India was Sone ki chidiya in ancient times. Now, because of the invaders, because of the aggressors, we have over past 1000 or 1500 years, we have degenerated, we have declined. Now it is the time for regeneration through various practices. So it is also imagined as modern, masculine and rational. It is modern because we also have to speak to the modern British Empire. It is masculine because unless and until we have masculine prowess, how can we fight against the British? How can we fight against them and get independence? So modern and rational, they have to come together. So he concludes by saying that historical writing becomes an act of political imagination and cultural self-determination. So if you see, Partho Chatterjee is not moving too far from Benedict Anderson here, but what significant filter he is applying is that of colonial imagination and colonial difference as to how the population in India, the elites and others, they were constantly in negotiation, in an imagined battle or in an imagined debate with the British on the one side and the Indian native population on the other. So as I said, the histories were rewritten, and this history were created by the dominant elites while negating the subaltern practices and fragmented memories with totalizing narratives. And even when certain subaltern practices or fragmented memories were taken care of, they were created as local narratives rather than a pan-Indian kind of dominant discourse. The second significant fragment of this Indian nation is its women. Now, as we discussed about that women were part of the inner domain. So, when they are part of the inner domain, the new woman was about that they are going to be educated, they are virtuous, but they have to follow patriarchal codes. They cannot move out of their houses and claim that, okay, we are empowered now, we are going to decide our own future. No, they will be educated, but The education will become a hallmark as how to become a good housewife rather than becoming empowered within a nationalist discourse. That is the reason why you can count on your fingertips the women leaders who were there as part of nationalist movement before Mahatma Gandhi came to picture. How many? I cannot remember as of now the number of people who were there, or number of women who were there. Rather, they were segregated to the inner domain. So, women were supposed to follow the tradition, and even if these traditions are taken, the traditions are worked out in terms of widow remarriage, in terms of ban on sati, the argument was this is in our inner domain, this is our zone, our ilaka, and in this ilaka the British is not allowed. So whatever reforms you are going to make, we are going to do it with our own women. The men or the nationalists here, in other words, said that we own these women are our property, and you cannot speak about our women, because that is a red line that will not allow you to cross. So when women's education was promoted, it was for moral training rather than for liberation, which anyways in later period women did not quite follow through. The other fragment of this nationalist imagination was its peasants, and the peasants were understood as a nobody, or whenever they would be subversive, it was called as pre-political, because how can the illiterate peasants be political? Because politics comes from the Britain, from the West. So anything that they say, anything that they speak about, it's all about their primordial relationships, about caste, about jati, about something else, but it cannot be political. So here the nationalists, as well as what Partha Chatterjee argues, is that the subaltern visions or subaltern voices were part of an alternative modernity, a modernity that is not synonymous with the West, that is not synonymous with the hybrid variety of our nationalist leaders. Rather, they were authentic, and it came from their own experiences within the rural life or within the tribal community. That is the reason why the many a times the voices of the peasants were fragmented, were not brought to the forefront, as they challenged the national homogeneity. Now, one of the final ones is about the nation and untouchables, or the so-called untouchables. What to do with them? Now, in the next two classes, we'll discuss more about this topic, so I will not spend much time here. The nationalist leaders had no answers for Dalits and Adivasis, or the Dalits and minorities, because the imagination was that of a dominant force of Hindu nation, Hindu idea of nation. So where do you place Dalits? Because in the Varna Vyavastha, you have the Brahmins, you have the Kshatriyas, you have the Vaishyas, you have the Shudras, and Dalits are the Panchamas, outside of this imagination. Minorities are outside of this imagination because they have come from outside. In that sense, we don't have answers for that, and when we don't have answers, it exposes the incompleteness of this imagined community that was very strongly articulated by leaders like the Baba Saheb Ambedkar, by leaders like others, whether it is Emin Roy, as well as many other leaders from the south, from the west, from the north, as well as from the east. Where are we? Whose imagined community is this? because now we have different segments of this imagined community, and in this imagined community the untouchables, the Dalits, the minorities, Adivasis have no role to play. Is it the idea of only the upper caste, upper class, elite, the men, or it is someone else? So the national state was a creation of liberal institutions but remained socially exclusive. While there was universality in citizenship in the West, we have a plural community which are not citizens. So post-colonialism is a way in which it is distinctively different from the way nation nationalism is understood in the global north. And this work of Partha Chatterjee became quite foundational, because what he did, he bridges the gap between subaltern studies, post-colonial theory and political philosophy. At the same time, he is also fusing Foucault, Gramsci and South Asian history. This way, he is not only being creative, but he is also challenging the dominant narratives that are being created about India, about global South, as well as about the role of colonialism in our understanding of modernity, in our understanding of nation building, in our understanding of how we think about ourselves. So this is the work that I have discussed, and as I have already mentioned in the previous class, you can go through some of these works so that you get a better understanding of what is nation and nationalism. In the next class, we will discuss G. Aloysius's work, Nationalism Without a Nation in India, and the following that we'll discuss Kanchail's work, Buffalo Nationalism. Thank you.